The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, and welcome to the Surround Health webinar, Beyond the Office. Visit Successfully Engaging with Patients Through Social Media, featuring Dana Lewis, Cheryl Ness, and Sarah Christensen. My name is Susan Eno-Collins. I'm the community leader for Surround Health, and I really am excited about having so many people join us for today's webinar. I'd like to thank our sponsor for today's webinar, HealthEd. HealthEd is the patient engagement company focused on helping you succeed in the new era of healthcare, and we really appreciate HealthEd's support in this webinar. And as the leaders in patient engagement for 25 years, they've been really looking and working in the area of providing patients as well as healthcare providers with the tools and skills for around patient engagement. As we get started, I just have a few housekeeping items to go through. One is, if you have any questions during the webinar, you can type them into the questions panel, and we'll get them on our end. So feel free to do that. For all of you who are on Twitter, please tweet, especially appropriate for this webinar, around social media, and if you can use the hashtag SHWebinar. The webinar is being recorded and archived, and we will have an archive up of the webinar within the next 2 days, and you'll get an email with that link. And for those who are certified health education specialists or registered dietitians, please be sure to complete the feedback survey at the end. Once we have that feedback, we will you'll be receiving your certificate of completion. Again, you will get an email letting you know when that is ready. So to get started, what we'd like to do is start with a quick poll to really gauge a sense of the people who are on the line in terms of how you're using social media now. So I'm just going to go ahead and launch the first poll. And just 1 second. If you could go ahead and select your answer. The poll is, do you currently use social media as a patient engagement tool? Yes or no? And if you could go ahead and put your vote in, we'd appreciate it. And I'll give a few seconds for the votes to come in. We have about half the people who voted so far. So if you haven't voted yet, please get your vote in. Okay, about 5 more seconds. Do you currently use social media as a patient engagement tool? Please select yes or no. All right, let's take a look at the results. And hopefully you'll be seeing the results on your end as well. But it looks like about 2/3 of you are using, I'm sorry, about 2/3 of you are not currently using social media as a patient engagement tool, and about 1/3 are. And so I think that's really helpful as we move into hearing from our speakers today, because really they'll be sharing their firsthand experiences of using social media at their medical centers. And really as we jump in, I'll hide the poll and we'll go to our next slide. As we jump in with the presentations, just wanted to provide a little bit of context in terms of even the title of today's webinar of Beyond the Office Visit, and really recognizing that over the last few years or several years with the growth of internet and social media, it's really caused a shift in how people really learn about their health conditions and learn about ways to cope and manage day to day. And while the formal education that patients have with their healthcare team face-to-face during office visits, during interactions or group classes, that's absolutely a critical part for patients. And really the shift has been the supplemental of that with informal education, where now there's self-guided learning, where patients really on their own are exploring other sources of health information and health engagement. And some of those health information resources may be more traditional websites where the content is really running one way and it's being consumed by the patient. but there are also health engagement resources is really where social media falls, and that's really more the two-way communication and the content and the interactions being created both by the people who are hosting the social media tools as well as those who are engaged with them. And so the focus today is really around those health engagement resources and the creating of that two-way engagement and where the opportunities are. So with that, I really am so pleased to introduce our three speakers today. We're going to start with Dana Lewis. Dana manages digital strategy and internal communications for Swedish, a non-for-profit health system serving the greater Seattle area. She also created and moderated #HCSM, the International Healthcare Communications and Social Community on Twitter. And this group meets every Sunday at 8 p.m. Central Time. So anybody can take part in that, and really they focus on a lot of the issues that come up around healthcare communications and social media, and it's a great opportunity to learn about the different issues and connect with others. Our second and third speaker will be from Mayo Clinic, and we have Cheryl Neff. Cheryl is an educator for Mayo Clinic Cancer Education Program. In her role as an educator, she helps inform and educate patients, families, and caregivers about the services and resources to help them through the cancer journey. Ms. Neff holds a master's degree in nursing from Augsburg College and is an assistant professor of oncology at the College of Medicine Mayo Clinic and is certified as a specialist in oncology nursing. She writes weekly blog articles for the Living with Cancer blog on mayoclinic.com and serves as a social media resource for the Mayo Clinic Cancer Center and is associate editor for the Journal of Cancer Education. She has a strong interest in the topics of health literacy, social media in healthcare, cancer survivorship, and quality of life concerns for patients living with cancer. And she will be joined by Sarah Christensen, also from Mayo, who is the manager of the Mayo Clinic Cancer Education Program. She provides overall direction and leadership to create a progressive and innovative program through strategic management and development of initiatives. With a staff of nurse educators, clinical trial coordinators, American Cancer Society, patient navigators, and a cancer librarian, the team is able to fulfill its mission of educating appropriate audiences on cancer-related issues. Ms. Christensen holds a master's degree in management as well as in health and human service administration. In addition, she is an executive board member of the National Cancer Patient Education Network and serves on the steering committee of the Minnesota Cancer Alliance. And so I really look forward to hearing from all three of them. And we'll start with Dana, who will talk about her perspective in the work that she does.
Thanks, Susan. And I wanted just to start by putting this more into context about why patients are using social media, why we're even talking about the idea of patient engagement online. And often I'll have people call me and say, okay, we want to do Facebook, we want to do Twitter. And my answer is, why? Who is there? Do you know how you're engaging? And you're going to hear a lot of these questions from me throughout my section of the presentation. But the first question I always ask people is if they know why patients are using social media. And a lot of people say, well, I don't really understand why. And then I ask why they do social media, because patients at the root of this, they're people. We're all patients, we're all people who use social media to connect and engage. So in fact, many patients don't start using social media as patients. They're using Facebook and Twitter personally, and then as they ebb and flow out of different stages of being a patient, whether it's because they have the flu, they're diagnosed with a chronic illness, they're caretaking for somebody who has a healthcare situation, that's really when they become patients and are looking at possibly using social media for healthcare purposes. So it's important to remember that a patient isn't always online as a patient 100% of the time. Somebody with diabetes, yes, always has diabetes, but they may not be using social media as a person with diabetes 100% of the time. They're using it as a person to connect and engage with their family, and for whatever reasons, they choose to be online. But it's not always about getting education and information related to diabetes. But when, to my point, when somebody does become a patient or is thinking about themselves as a patient, a lot of times they go online for information. And so that's, if you're starting to think about how to engage patients online, and if you can engage patients online, before you can get to the engagement point, it's kind of like a chicken and an egg, because you want to engage people, but how and where do you do that? And what's the most appropriate way for you to do that? And that's the question I'm often asked is, how do you engage with people if they don't know that you're there? And the way to do that is have information and start with that information resource, whether it's a blog post or something else. And we'll talk about different kinds of content in a minute. But the approach that Swedish took was that we created a blog that had many, many, many providers across our system putting out content. So that way when people were searching on their favorite search engine or online, they might run across our content and engage with us there. Then people can comment and engage on the blog or on our other social channels, but it's a starting point by giving them information and by allowing them to start or join a conversation that's ongoing, whereas traditionally you might not know as a patient that you could engage with a healthcare professional online or a healthcare organization. So by putting information out there, it's a starting ground and a starting place for this engagement and these conversations. So when people ask me about getting off the ground, again, people tend to think, okay, I want a Facebook page, I want to do Twitter, I want a YouTube channel. But the really important thing to think about, again, is not the channels, not where you're going to put this content, but what the content is. And a good example is the fact that Facebook changes once a week their algorithm, and I'm constantly working with, in my organization, but also other providers out there who are always asking, my post isn't showing up in the feed, I'm not getting a ton of views, I'm not getting a ton of engagement, why is this happening? Why does Facebook keep changing? And you have to realize that you are renting that space. It may be, quote, free space that you can use Facebook for free or Twitter for free, but they own the platform. They can change the algorithms anytime they want. So the only thing you own is your content. So if you, at the root of your engagement strategy, if you focus on creating a presence and having useful, relevant, interesting content for your audience, who is the patients first, then you will be able to maintain that no matter whether you're talking about Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Google+, Pinterest, Instagram, even Snapchat, which we'll talk about in a second. But the focus is, if you focus on the content and how that's going to help people, then it doesn't matter what channel you end up using. So when I talk about engagement, I often talk about how are you going to start, what kind of content are you going to use that people can find you, and then you can start engaging. And the other thing, too, is to think about who your audience is. As healthcare providers, you probably have different kinds of audience. Your patient population may be pediatric. They may be an older population who is very, very active on one form of social media rather than another. Or you may have an audience with hearing loss, for example. And so using videos and YouTube may not be the best way to engage with them. And so you may have to think about different forms, whether it's using still images and text-based content like blog posts, or even you can still use videos, but you would have to make a conscious effort to transcribe all of your videos to be accurate. So it's also really important to think about who your audience is, where they are, and how they choose to engage with media, and make sure that the media is accessible to them. And the other thing, too, is so much of social media seems to be in real time. You want to be online. You need to be able to engage quickly within a timely period because that's what people expect through social media. But you also should realize that the content that you're creating is really valuable. And just because you tweet something out once doesn't mean that everybody sees it. Or just because you do a live webinar, for example, doesn't mean that everybody can tune on and listen. So it's really valuable to figure out ways to package things, like we're recording this webinar, or you would do a video of a live education seminar, or you would capture your tweets later and turn them into a blog post so that you can get them to people who weren't able to listen live. And that's something I think that is overlooked a lot by healthcare providers because they get so worried about how do I engage live and how do I carve out time for this, but not realizing that people will come back and look at the content later and ask questions later about something that happened even a year ago. And that's really valuable engagement because the knowledge that you have isn't always tied to a certain day and time. A lot of the basic engagement and information you share online with patients will be relevant to another group of patients at a different time. So it's great to think about not only how can you engage in real time or with responding within a decent period of time, say 24 hours to a question online, but then also thinking about how can you capture this information and collect it and then reformat it and use it later so that other patients and people online can access it. And so again, it's all about creating these touch points where people can find you and start engaging. Because if you don't have these places where people can find you, there's not a good way for people to engage with you. Again, it's a chicken or egg situation. And something else to realize too is that you don't always have to create your own social media presence. Again, I get questions all the time, can we have a Facebook page, can we do this, can we do that? Sometimes the answer is yes, but sometimes the answer is you know what, we just want to get out this one message during this one period of time. Why don't we partner with somebody, whether it's one of our existing channels or a partner organization, and see if we can use their channels to get our message out, whether it's a guest blog post, you know, we could live tweet from their account. There's any number of things you can do, because just like you as an individual provider or an organization, there's many other providers and organizations looking for engagement. They're looking for people to staff their accounts, and they're looking for content because they too want to connect with your audiences. So there's a lot of power in talking to other organizations and other people and saying, can we share your content? Do you want to share ours? Could we guest blog on your site? So instead of having to create your own outpost, if you're not ready for that, to constantly engage and be responsible for that, this is a great way to start working with other organizations, building those relationships, and getting a feel for social media, but on a short-term basis, say engaging with a single blog post rather than creating an entire new blog. And then it's also good because these organizations could be anything from community organizations, they could be other healthcare organizations like the American Heart Association, American Diabetes Association. There's a lot of groups out there also looking to engage people online. So you can really leverage each other and take advantage of those opportunities to get information out there without always having to build your own site. And then the question I always get is if some of you may be healthcare providers, some of you may be formally representing an organization that uses social media, and it's so easy to want to get the next big thing. It could be Instagram or Vine or Snapchat or Pinterest or whatever is coming down the pike that's new and next and different and interesting. And the answer doesn't always need to be yes. If you have the content and you have the bandwidth to support that new channel, by all means consider creating that new account. But if you just want to try it out, again, consider partnering with a person or an organization that has that channel and to see if you have the content to fuel that channel, if your audience is even there. Your audience may not be there, and in that case, you don't want to spend a lot of your time putting your content there or creating custom content for that, that channel. An example I like to use is when we used Instagram to live tweet a cochlear implant surgery. We did not have a Swedish Instagram account, and we still don't. But we wanted to use Instagram and tweet a surgery to show people with hearing loss what the procedure was like instead of doing a live streaming video like we're used to doing. So we partnered with our PR firm and used one individual's Instagram account, which he volunteered, to put out the tweets and the Instagram photos and post. And it was very, very successful. He warned his followers what he was going to be doing and disclaimed that he was affiliated with us. But it was a very effective way for us to be able to use this tool for a short period of time for this one project, use it for the purpose that it was meant to be used for, and then we were done with it. And he went back to using it as his personal account. But because of that, I don't have to create a Swedish Instagram account, and I don't have to, constantly be putting photos out there, because right now, as Swedish, my focus in the content creation I'm working on is not photo-based. That doesn't work for us. So again, this is a great example of how it worked for us, and I would encourage you to think about partnering with other organizations or test driving different accounts and channels without necessarily having to create one and go through the all the work of creating this outpost, staffing it, and making sure you can respond to people in real time. Because again, being able to respond and engage with people is the whole point of social media. And again, it doesn't matter what social media channel, tool, platform you use, it's really important to remember to package your efforts. Again, this goes back to, is your audience with you in real time and they're engaging with you, or are they, is it 3 a.m. in the morning and they're worried about, the healthcare concern that they have and they're looking online? Can they get to the content that you talked about 2 weeks ago in a live chat? So there's different tools like Storify, where if you do a live tweet chat, you can pull in tweets, pictures, videos, blog posts, and create a story that tells everything that happened on social media. You can take an event and put it in a blog post. There's so many different things you can do to package your content. And again, it's a really, really valuable way to take what you're doing in real time on social media and use it again and again and again, so you get the most value for the time you spent online, the content you're creating, and the engagement you're doing with people. Because you have to remember, when you post to Facebook as an organization or a person, or you tweet something out, the content will fly by based on Facebook's algorithm, or when somebody's checking Twitter, they may not see the content. So there's often times where you have to post something multiple times in multiple ways in order to get people's attention. And that's okay. But if you don't package your content, you're just focusing on people seeing it live, then you're going to miss a whole audience of people who would appreciate those resources and want to engage with you because of it at a later time. So in terms of healthcare providers being online, a lot of questions I get about, HIPAA, privacy, security, how do we handle those things? And before you even get to being online as a healthcare provider or an organization, it's really important to be prepared. And there's two main things you need. And the first is an internal social media policy. And this explains to employees how you'll engage using social media and how they're allowed to use social media. So your organization should have one of these. If they don't, ask about creating one. But it really sets the rules and the guidelines for when you can speak on behalf of your organization, when you're speaking on behalf of yourself. And it's really important as an individual to know that, but also to go by these principles to keep yourself safe and using social media online. And it's just these kind of rules of the road to make sure that everybody's on the same page for how you're going to use these sites. Are you going to talk to patients? Are you just going to put information out? When do you respond? How do you sign up for these things, etc.? And I'm happy to share our version of this social media policy, and the easy version. You can see a screenshot on the screen. I'm happy to share that with anybody after the webinar. And the other most important thing you need to have is an external social media policy that explains how you or your organization is using social media, how you expect people to engage with you, what your response time is, when you would delete content, ban users, not respond to people, and then also if somebody's having an issue, like a medical emergency, they need to talk to their doctor, how to reach your traditional customer service, patient relations channels, because a lot of times people turn to social media because they don't know where to go for the traditional channels. So you need to have this easy to find, easy to read way to say, hey, I can't respond to a specific medical questions. I can give you general information, but if you have specific medical questions, talk to your healthcare provider. If you're having a medical emergency, call 911, all that kinds of stuff. So it's really great to have a simple, easy-to-read version, and then you can also have the really formal, extended version that makes your legal team happy. And again, one of our examples is posted online at swedish.org/social media policy, and it covers all of this information. And this protects our entire organization, and it also protects any individual who's using social media formally with my team. They're bound by these policies and these rules as well. So if a patient complains or a person has a question about why we deleted a comment or didn't post a comment, we can point to this policy and explain why, so people can understand how we're engaging online. And so by having internal rules of the road and the external social media policy, this has made a huge difference in being able to engage with people and feeling safe as an organization, but also for our healthcare providers to know what the expectations are for them and for people to engage with them. So it's really just making sure that you kind of set the stage for how you'll talk to people online, how you'll engage, and how you won't engage in the case of, again, maybe it's specific medical information or attacking an individual, whatever the case may be. But it's really important to have this and understand this because it makes everybody, patients, the public, and healthcare providers safer online. And the other tip I like to give people is whether we are talking as ourselves as people or we're representing an organization, there's going to be times where people won't like what we say. They take it out of context. They get offended for whatever reason, or they're upset. Just so you know, deleting posts usually stirs up the conversation on Facebook. And so there's a way to hide a post from a Facebook page that allows you to continue to have the conversation there, but it's not being broadcast to the rest of Facebook per se. So that's one option instead of just deleting a post. Another great option is ignoring a post. You don't have to respond to everything. And although it may be hard because you feel like I'm not doing social media right, I'm ignoring this person, because of HIPAA and privacy and just good common sense, sometimes it's easier to ignore a post and let that one person think poorly of you than it is to respond and potentially trip across privacy or have more people jump in the conversation when it really needed to be a private conversation through traditional channels, etc. The other thing, too, is if you do have something happening online, instead of deleting or hiding, sometimes it might be relevant to leave a post up and responding directly with an apology or comment or clarification. And instead of then having 50 posts on a Facebook page, people might comment within that thread and really cut down on the overall conversation so that you can go back to what your goal is, whether it's, again, putting out healthcare information, engaging with patients, being a resource, whatever that is. But I would recommend thinking about all these types of issues, not to scare people off, but I think if you think about them in advance and have a plan for how you might react to some of these different situations, it'll really help you respond in real time if something comes up. And the other important thing is know who your support teams are. If you work for a healthcare organization, know who handles social media, whether it's the legal team, marketing, communications, who can help you figure out how to handle an issue. By having those teams in place and knowing when you can punt to patient relations, for example, or tell them to call their own doctor, that'll really help you have the language ready to be able to post a response to somebody so you don't really have to worry about figuring that all out in the heat of a moment. So again, the more you think about that in advance, the better. I definitely recommend it, but that's not to say you can't do social media, you shouldn't do social media. You definitely should. And so I just wanted to go through a couple of myths that I get a lot. One being you can't do social media because of HIPAA and privacy reasons. And the answer is nobody reads HIPAA from my experience. I've read HIPAA. It doesn't say anything about not doing social media. HIPAA is there to protect patients from having their information disclosed without their authorization. But that doesn't mean that if somebody talks to you, a healthcare provider, on Twitter, on Facebook, on your page where you've set that up, that you can't provide general health information. You're obviously not going to diagnose or treat them online, but there's no reason you can't post general health information. Even if it happens to be one of your patients that comes online, you wouldn't treat them any different than you would any other person who's online, because you don't know on social media whether somebody's a patient, a potential patient, or not a patient at all. So it's totally fine to share general health information and engage online as long as you have those principles behind it of, if you think the question is too much a specific medical question, telling them to talk to their doctor. If it's a medical emergency, call 911, etc. But that doesn't preclude you from doing social media. And the second myth is tied up into that providers can't interact with patients online. They can, but the rule of thumb is treat everybody the same, whether they're an existing patient, a past patient, potentially a future patient, the general public, which could be a potential patient. The idea is you can interact with the public online. You're not going to diagnose anybody. You're not going to treat them, but you can talk to people online. And then the other myth is that social media is hard. And while it's complex, I wouldn't say that it's hard, because the basics is what you do as a healthcare provider, which is caring for people, providing information and education. And that's what you do every day. This is just another forum, another set of channels and opportunities to do that. So I would encourage you to think about social media in that vein. It's another set of channels and opportunities to engage with people and to meet your goals of caring for them, educating them, making them aware of a situation, a condition, whatever. But it's not that social media itself is hard. It may just be hard to figure out what you want to do with it. And then the last myth that I tend to get a lot is that the return on investment is minimal. And I've found that people who say that don't go into this with goals clearly established. It's okay to go into this without goals, but I recommend coming up with one or two things to try to say, can I drive more traffic to my website? Can I drive awareness of this certain topic or this resource that I have for patients? And try using your tools and resources to be able to drive that engagement and meet those goals, because then you can actually measure the return on investment and how much time you spend online and was it worthwhile to you. You may decide it's not worthwhile to you. That's fine, but if you don't go into it with goals and ideas and try different things, then you're never going to know. So I, of course, recommend that you go into it with goals, find a way to measure it, and figure out what's valuable to you to see if it really does meet your needs. And so quickly, I just wanted to share 10 things that we've learned personally, I think, and I would say on behalf of Swedish, is that we know it's not about the channels. It's not about Facebook or Twitter. What it is about helping patients who are people when they need it, whether it's health information, connecting them with our clinics and our healthcare providers, educating them, raising awareness, whatever. But it's, again, the social media isn't the media. It's about the people behind it. The other thing we've learned is that good social media can lead to mainstream media attention, which gets the attention of the public, which gets you back to more people to engage with online. So having a robust online presence, a great conversation online, can lead to other things as well. But again, it's really focusing on the content. So find ways to produce content, or you have content from journal articles you're writing, presentations you're giving, seminars you're doing. So just find a way to package that content and get it online in different ways. And the other thing too is, like social media can lead to mainstream media attention, there's also great people online, whether it's patient advocates, other healthcare organizations, who are going to be great advocates of your message and engage with you online, and invest in those relationships and those interactions just like you would the mainstream media and being out in the public, because online is just another form of public. And integrate social media into everything. If you have a great online presence, make sure that you tell people about that in your clinic, in your office, in your organization, on your website, and everything you're doing. You don't have to do it alone. You can go into it with a group of healthcare providers, with your larger organization. Even if you are a solo practitioner, there's tons of group online, like Susan mentioned, HCSM, HCSM, the healthcare chat, where there's solo practitioners and group practitioners and people who all come together to talk and learn and support each other, because it does take a lot of energy and a lot of people in order to make this work. But again, package your social media efforts. So do something once, package it up, and find another way to share that message online. And then also what's really valuable about social media is being able to use it as a listening tool. So learning from patients, learning what their questions are, seeing what the misconceptions are that you can correct with online information, or fixing issues that come up in healthcare in general. It's a really powerful tool that you can learn from just by being out there and listening and engaging with people and being open to it. Don't be afraid to facilitate or own it. Again, you can start small. You can try it partnering with other organizations. You don't have to do everything. You don't have to set up a blog, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Google+, Pinterest, everything. You can try one thing, see what works, and realize that not everything is going to work for you. Personally, I love Twitter. I'm less fond of Facebook, but Facebook works really, really well for Swedish patients and the public, so we do a lot of that for Swedish, whereas other people are really, really successful with Google+ or Pinterest. It really depends on your personality and the kind of content you're producing, but also who your audience is, where they are, and what type of content they're going to engage with. And of course, this is going to take work, but it's definitely worth it. And again, the last thing that I'll end my section on is that first you need to know who you're engaging with, where they are online, and why they're online. Are they online looking for information? Are they online just because they are people and they're online? When they're looking for information or looking to engage as a patient, know what they're doing, why they're doing it, and then you can connect and engage with them. And that's probably the most important thing to remember is it's not about the tools, it's about the patient. And with that, I'd like to hand it back to Susan.
Great. Thank you so much, Dana. I think you've given a really great overview as well as really practical learnings that you have from your experience. So I really thank you. We're going to do a quick poll, and then we will go on to our next speakers. So this is the question: do you have an internal and external social media policy? We just heard Dana talk about the importance of it. So the answers are yes, no, not sure, I don't know. And let's just take a few seconds. We have about half the folks who voted. If you haven't voted yet, jump in because we're going to close it in 10 seconds. Give you a few more seconds. All right, it looks like we have most everybody who's voted. Do you have an internal and external social media policy? Yes, no, not sure, I don't know. Let's look at the results. And it looks like we're split in thirds. So that's really helpful to see. All right. So our next speakers are Cheryl Ness and Sarah Christensen, and they'll be speaking about their experiences from the perspective of working with the Mayo Clinic Cancer Education Program. So I'm going to turn it over to Cheryl.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Susan and Surround Health and Health Ed for this invitation to talk with you today. And really, our section of the presentation, Sarah and I will touch on some of the objectives for the overall objectives of this talk, and really kind of builds on what Dana was talking about earlier. And she really gave just some real practical, just incredible practical issues for getting started. And what I'm going to present along with Sarah is our experience from Mayo Clinic after 4 years of having a blog with cancer survivors. And maybe I'll have, oh, there we go. So these are the objectives that I'd like to cover, and we're really just going to be touching on these. And mostly what we want to talk about today is why is it important to engage people? And specifically, we wanted to know, how do we engage cancer survivors? We know that it's important to engage people. We see them in our practice. We see them for classes during their diagnosis and treatment. But when treatment's over, they go back home, and we may not have the ability to touch them or have any interaction with them again. So when we looked at this issue, we really looked at what's our audience, and we knew that there's over 13 million cancer survivors in the U.S., and this number is increasing. The 5-year survival rate is increasing due to better treatments and cure. And that number of cancer survivors is just going to continue to increase along with the aging population. So it was something that we were really interested in doing, and decided to create a social media adventure, really, around that. At the same time that social media was sort of blooming at Mayo Clinic, we were doing a cancer survivor survey of needs. This was back in 2008, and the results of this were just published this year. But we got a pretty good group of patients from all different diagnostic groups. Over 300 survivors responded to this. There was a broad representation of time since diagnosis, from those early diagnosed to patients who had been diagnosed 20 years ago. And we looked at, as an overall, what were their top 5 overall concerns. And it really kind of was something that was also seen in the literature and in research, but it was something that we saw as well as part of our research, that fear of recurrence was number 1. Fatigue, living with uncertainty, I think that was something that we thought about, but it was really interesting to see what patients told us about that. Also, how to manage stress as a survivor, and then sleep came up as one of those overall 5 concerns as well. So if we think about social media, how it got started at Mayo Clinic, and this kind of goes into buy-in. We did a variety of social media initiatives were started at Mayo Clinic about that same time, around 2002 to 2004. I'm here.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to keep talking. I'm getting a little feedback. I'm so sorry. We also did focus groups, and patients really wanted to help us with that. The focus group helped us define what they wanted from mayoclinic.com. And they told us that they wanted reassurance of the unknown. They wanted hope for the future. They wanted to understand the lived condition of the specific disease that they were diagnosed with. They also wanted a place to empower them to make good healthcare decisions. And so one of the last things that they told us was that they also wanted a place to share stories. So the Living with Cancer blog was realized because of that leadership support at the very beginning, from Mayo Clinic's CEO to the leadership of the Cancer Center, together with feedback from this focus group and our cancer survivorship research. We embarked on this endeavor. And the Living with Cancer blog is one of many blogs that Mayo Clinic has online, including blogs to support diabetes patients, Alzheimer's disease, stress management, and nutrition, among others. So as Dana mentioned, we really need to think about social media as part of our job. It's not something that we do extra. It's a new way that we can engage people. As I mentioned before, our patient population is not local. Many patients come to Mayo Clinic to be diagnosed and treated, and then they leave to go back to their home environment. So what that says to me is that we need to be online. We need to be engaging them where they are. In those conversations, whether they be blogs or through Twitter or Facebook, we really need to be able to connect with them that way. So those digital conversations can be a part of how we work with patients across the continuum. And it really is a change in the way people expect to receive information and resources. They're looking for it. So social media is really a powerful tool. Dana mentioned this as well. It provides direct access for patients to the experts in a way that we've never really had before. And it provides you as an organization the opportunity to build relationships with the public and patients that you may have not met yet. You can also, as Dana mentioned, use other social media tools to engage patients and drive them to your website, blogs, resources, what have you. And at Mayo, we also started using the QR codes on all of our marketing pieces, as most people have smartphones these days, and that technology can drive people also to your website. Dana mentioned ROI, and it's pretty significant when you think about what even just one blog can do. On mayoclinic.com, within a 3-month period, the Living with Cancer blog generates around 69,000 page views. That's pretty impressive. And again, you're engaging patients in a different way, and you're touching people who are not even your patients yet, but they are looking at this, and also your reputation to be able to reach out to others. So let's segue into more details about the Living with Cancer e-newsletter and blog. It is a weekly e-newsletter. People opt in to subscribe to this, and it is at this point we've had up to 55,000 people subscribe. The blog is the lead story for that weekly newsletter, and after 4 years we actually have over 100 open topics, over 3,000 comments, and of those 3,000 comments we recently looked at how many of those were people responding to each other, and there were over 400 in people who were responding to each other. So it's really a wonderful way to connect with others, and it covers all of those different aspects that people said they needed some additional help with as a survivor dealing with cancer through the weeks, months, and years after their diagnosis and treatment is over. So the hashtag I use on Twitter is Living with Cancer, and I know Dana mentioned this as well. It's not unique to us. We use Living with Cancer as a hashtag, but there's a lot of cross-connection to others with similar goals on Twitter. The mainstream media connection is really important. It increases your reach and readership. For example, the hashtag Living with Cancer is also used by others who have similar goals. For example, many of you may know Susan Gubar, who writes an incredible blog from a patient perspective on the New York Times, in the New York Times Well magazine, also called Living with Cancer. So we frequently have cross conversations between her group and our group, and just in general people talking about living with cancer, and I think that's really important. To think about a little bit about management of 100 open topics, I spend about 12 to 16 hours a week managing writing the new topic and then moderating and looking at the comments that are currently on the blog. So that just gives you an idea of time-wise. So another item I wanted to talk about is this privacy issue, and Dana mentioned this too. We really do have an overarching internal policy for our staff as well as an external policy. And when patients come to the blog and they go to comment, they see that right away. They see the privacy policy as they're commenting, so it reminds them of what they're participating in. It's really embedded into that process. Participants opt in, really, to participate in the blog, so they only need to provide their first name, and all other identifiers are removed. I rarely need to remove a post because of something that's posted, but we do when needed. We can also remove identifiers that we feel might be something that we wouldn't want to have out there, or links that are placed on the site. We always review the links to make sure that they're reliable sources. If they are and they're helpful, we leave them. However, if it's more of a spam or an advertisement or something like that, we are able to take those off. And we don't have a review process before the actual comments are placed out on the blog. They're actually live. So I know many people have asked me that. We do not have a review process. So our comments go live, and then we are able to really look at them after the fact and very quickly can change or take off links or information if need to. If we talk a little bit about moderating, that can be a daunting thought. I didn't really know what to expect when I started writing and moderating the blog. I usually monitor the discussions and comments daily for the newest topics, and then we have set up a weekly report that summarizes all of the new comments on any of the 100 different topics. So it's easier for me to manage. Most importantly, I really look for misinformation or bad information, and I remove that when needed. And I respond to questions or discussions that need direction. But also really important to remember is to keep keep the discussion and let it happen naturally without much intervention at first. The idea is to give people a chance to support each other. You may need to guide the conversation to reliable information if needed, but also it's important to be personal. It shows you're a real person who is understanding, supportive, and compassionate. And really, for me, it's an honor to be engaging with patients through the blog on a daily and weekly basis. And I'm really, it's phenomenal to see the conversations that happen, the support that people give each other on the blog. So next, the next slide, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah, who's going to talk a little bit about our aha moments and some of the feedback that we've gotten from the blog, some quotes and some word cloud information on some of the more popular topics that we've gotten.
Thanks, Cheryl. What I'd like to share next are, as Cheryl said, our aha moments, and these are based upon our review and then categorizing of those over 3,000 comments that were posted to the Living with Cancer blog. And what we found is that by offering a social media platform is that patients will feel less isolated after treatment. They can find someone with whom to connect. Especially patients with rare or unusual cancers, there are no geographical boundaries when you're online or using a blog. So someone with a similar situation could be across the world, and it doesn't matter. They're still reachable. The blog offers opportunities to discuss difficult topics in an anonymous manner and also in a very honest manner. And we've got a quote to show you in a moment that represents that. Peer-to-peer support happens naturally, and in addition to meeting the needs of families, or patients, the families, and also friends and caregivers will go onto the blog and ask questions regarding someone that they care for. And also it uniquely meets patients where they're at, which is online. And they're searching for information, for education support, and as Dana mentioned, it's often at 2 a.m. So by having the electronic platform, patients can find us and speak with one another and find the support that they need. All right. I am trying to advance the slide. There we go. So the following series of slides summarize a few of the powerful discussions that we've found on the blog. We use the program Wordle to create word clouds that show the frequency of words used within a conversation within a specific topic. While you're viewing this word cloud, I'll read you a quote that we took from the blog that we felt was representative to the topic. So the first topic is fatigue, and the patient quote is, "Thanks, Cheryl, for writing about this important issue of cancer-related fatigue. So many healthy people do not understand the fatigue issue that cancer patients face. I am a long-term, over 20 years, blood cancer patient, and fatigue is just part of my daily life. I do know exercise and yoga help with fatigue. Also, one must stay hydrated properly, so having that timely drink of water and having a snack prior to hitting the fatigue wall helps as well." Next topic is finding the new normal, and the patient quote, "My fellow survivors, my heart is with each and every one of you. I struggle day to day with the thoughts of who I am and where I'm going. It all changed in the blink of an eye with the diagnosis of cancer. No matter what we are told, we fear and struggle to be brave for our loved ones, and we fight. Please feel my heart. I am fighting with you and against cancer for myself and all. That is my new normal." Fear of recurrence. I so appreciate this blog. I've experienced such anxiety about recurrence. I think it is a fear that can only be understood by someone that has been actually received the news that you, yes you, have cancer. People want to hear you're doing well, that you are fighting. Sometimes we are. Other times we are anxious, alone, and tired. It feels good to be able to just say that. Prostate cancer, sexual side effects. I had the Da Vinci surgery 5 years ago. Went out of network with minimal insurance coverage, and it cost me plenty. To get the surgery, as my urologist pushed it on me as one of the best ways for sparing nerves. I was only 45. I have never had an erection since. My marriage is over. I'm very depressed. If I had to do it all over, I would have done nothing and told no one I had prostate cancer. How has cancer changed you? I appreciate family, friends, moments, and life so much more. I take more chances, getting out of my comfort zone, and experience more that life has to offer. I have a heightened awareness of how special and fragile life is, and I expect no guarantees about anything or anyone. So in summary, we found that social media can be a very powerful tool to reach patients, and continuing goals for the blog as well as our other social media platforms will be to continue to empower patients, to enhance our educational opportunities and also awareness of those opportunities, to provide interpersonal connections, and also to increase access to the unique resources. Thank you, Susan.
Great. Thank you so much, Sarah. I really appreciate that, and I think really bringing the words of the people who've commented on your blogs is so powerful. We're going to take questions, and as we're having people type in their questions in the question panel, I'm going to launch one more poll, and then we will go right into the questions. The last one is, in which ways do you now use or plan to use social media and patient engagement? Click any or check any of it that you plan to use: listening tool, relationship building, extending patient education beyond in-person interactions, all the above, or not sure. So take a few seconds to vote, and in the meantime, we'll get the questions going. I'll give you about 5 more seconds. Okay, and let's take a look at the results. It looks like people are looking to really extend beyond their in-person interactions, and then all of the above, as well as people not sure right now. So it really gives you a great range. So let's jump into the questions, and I'm going to start, I think, with actually, Dana, one question that came up when you were going through your section was you had shown using a video via Instagram, and we got several questions around the process of permission you went through from the patient perspective and staff perspective on that video, because video is used so much. So would you mind talking about that?
Yeah, just to clarify, the Instagram project we used was only still pictures and live tweeting, but whether you do a live video stream or anything regarding patients, the privacy is the same. So what we did is the idea actually came to us from the clinic, from the doctor and his team who wanted to raise awareness. So they were actively involved in shaping the project. But we did get agreement and consent from our doctors and all staff involved at every stage who participated. And then we also, every time we took a picture, made sure they remembered they were being photographed and they were okay with it putting it out. And then we had to ask the doctor to identify a patient who might be interested in participating. And after he identified the patient, we met with her, talked with her, and explained the entire situation, how this would be used, and got her to sign a consent form. It's important to know that our consent forms say that at any time if a patient changes their mind, they can absolutely say, stop recording, take it down, whatever. But in the era of social media, even if we took down our pictures, we deleted our tweets, we deleted the live stream video, people could take screenshots, they may have retweeted, shared, etc. So it's really extra important now that patients understand that they can withdraw their consent, but once they agree that some of this content may live on forever, even if we do delete our copies of it. So it's something I feel very strongly about educating patients as well as our clinical staff about to make sure they're comfortable with it. And we, of course, partnered with our legal team in terms of designing the project, making sure our forms were correct, et cetera.
Great. Thank you. The next question I think I'll direct to Cheryl and Sarah. And that is, you had, there was a question about how you handle misinformation. So when a person is commenting on a blog and you can see that that is misinformation, how do you handle that? Do you let the conversation unfold for other readers to weigh in? Can you just speak a little bit more on that?
That's a really good question, and it does happen frequently, actually. But I think you're right. It's what we do. We tend to leave the comments on there, and frequently even other people will comment and redirect, even without my intervention. But I usually go on and provide more focused information and correct the misinformation with resources so that they get back on track. And it happens naturally, but I do really look at that. As soon as it happens, I try to address it right away. But frequently, other people have already gone on and commented about it, but that's really important to do.
The next question, and I think, Dana, if you could start us off, and then I'm sure Cheryl and Sarah, you might want to weigh in. The next question is from a listener who's really trying to think about, she's a diabetes educator, and thinking about using social media as a self-management education tool in terms of how do you conduct self-management education sessions via social media. And curious to know your thoughts on that. And it also goes with another question from a speaker in terms of how far do you go in terms of specific information based on a patient's needs?
Yeah, that's an absolute great question. So there's two parts of this. There's one is how can you do it? What are the technological tools to be able to do this? Do you use a Google Plus Hangout? Do you use a webinar, et cetera? Then there's also kind of the legal privacy, patient safety privacy question of how do you do it online. And my first guess is I think this would be a great forum for it. You would obviously have to let people know how to participate and how it might differ from an in-person situation, but I'm aware of several groups across the country who are doing live sessions like this where people opted to participate in this online forum and they understand there might be 5 or 6 or 10 other people on there who will see their questions and whatever, but people can also use the first name only or whatever in order to feel safe participating online. It's just a matter of whether you're setting it up so it's just a group of 10 or 15 or if you're setting it up so that anybody could kind of see it on the internet. I would recommend that slightly more closed group way where you can get the information out on social media and you do it online and virtually, but that people still have that closed group feeling where they feel safe to truly ask all their questions. And then I would ask your legal team about the legal opt-in to agree to be able to do that education online and how that differs from just tweeting out education information to a general public versus providing very targeted education. That's very different. But I would just make sure that you talk with your legal team and make sure that you set up that forum in a way that's clear that it's a formal education session that you happen to be doing using these online tools, and you get the opt-in from patients and everything, but that shouldn't preclude you from using these awesome tools to do something like that.
Yeah, I agree, Dana. Yeah, I think that's a really fantastic idea, and we've actually been trying to set up our survivorship series online with that in mind, kind of that self-management idea in mind, but knowing that we would have to probably have it a little more controlled, as you mentioned, and have people opt in and, again, protect privacy and really kind of walk that line. But I think it's a fantastic tool to do that because people don't have time to be in person with you for a class, for a weekly session, for especially for something like diabetes management.
And while it would be great to have the sessions live with the ability to archive, people can go back and connect that way as well. And as Cheryl said, we're really excited to give this a try with our survivorship classes.
Great, thank you. One question that came up from the discussion on return of investment, ROI, is are there any studies that any of you are aware of that actually speak to that as well? I know, Dana, you made a great point that the ROI starts with defining the objective and using that. Is anybody aware of studies that look at that?
I have seen case studies where people have measured the time and the financial resources input versus perceived what they got out of it. I'm not a huge fan of those studies just because I don't necessarily agree with the goals that were established and how their calculations. And I also would say if you're trying to figure out what the ROI is, it, again, it totally depends on your goals because your goals are likely going to be very, very different than everybody else's. And so I would do your own mini case study and say, this is my goal. I want to see if I can get return, and the return will look like this. Maybe it's time saved, it's financial gain, it's more patients, whatever that is. but it's going to be so different from person to person and organization to organization that I think it's really hard to look at blanket case studies and say, okay, yes, this proved the ROI, because what your patients need and what your community needs is so different in every case.
Cheryl, go ahead.
Yeah, I have to. Yeah, I have to agree. I think it's really hard, and I think we'll see more research as social media becomes more and more popular. But I agree. I mean, what's the price of relationship building? That's not something you can really put a dollar amount to, but yet it's really important. And also that connection, that virtual connection with people and your patients from afar. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in the research in the coming years.
And lastly, it is hard to measure, but it also adds credibility to our program to say, you know, we've got 55,000 people reading this e-newsletter, or we've got 1,500 likes on the Facebook page, or it shows that people are engaging with us and therefore with Mayo Clinic as well. So it is very hard to put a cost or an ROI on that.
Yeah, and one more comment. I wouldn't focus on a single metric like likes on a post or likes on a page. I would look at a collection of metrics and look at them as data points. So the total number of people reading your post, the number of comments, the number of people overall new versus returning, I would figure out a set of data points that you can measure and use that collectively to assess return, rather than relying on a single data point of likes of a page, number of tweets, number of blog comments, etc. Because that people engage in different ways, whether they're lurking and just reading, whether they're actively commenting and engaging. There's a bunch of different ways to do that, so you want multiple data points that you can really look at holistically and overall to say, did I get return on this or not?
Exactly.
Well, thank you. I think that's a great way to wrap up our questions. I know that I would go another whole hour of just questions and answers, so I really appreciate to all three of our speakers who have really provided us great insights and practical tips as well. So just to wrap up, don't forget the webinar completion certificate will be available in your Surround Health profile starting tomorrow. You need to go to the profile, the edit button to find that. We'll also be sending out an email to remind you. The archive of this webinar is available in the webinar section of Surround Health. We've had a few other questions come in today that we haven't been able to get to, and all three speakers are gracious enough. They're going to go on to Surround Health. We'll have a discussion thread going with some of those additional questions and answers. Please complete the feedback survey. It will come up it'll pop up when you leave the webinar, and we really appreciate all of your feedback because we're now in the thick of planning for next year, 2014, and want to be able to hear what you're interested in as well. So with that, I really want to say thank you to Health Ed, our sponsor, for helping us bring another really engaging webinar to us today, and also want to thank all of you who've been on the line and wish you a happy holiday season. And thank you again to all three of our speakers, Dana, Cheryl, and Sarah. Have a good day.